Next item, discussion by council vote or other action on appointments to town boards and commissions. Economic Development Commission, appointed by the town administrator with town council approval. Still researching.
No recommendations this evening.
Juvenile Hearing Board, appointed by the town council. I still have not seen the name. Are we looking?
We have a pending circumstance. I'm looking for a final recommendation from the hearing board. I believe that will be before us in no later than August. We will. They are taking the summer off as usual anyway.
Next item, Parks and Rec Commission, appointment by the town administrator with town council approval, completion of 1 2-year term that expires 12/1/20. And Senior Citizens Commission, Mrs. O'Hara, do we have any names for that yet? Are we still working?
No, we have like 4, but we want a batch before we
Okay.
get through.
New business, discussion by council vote or other action on request for waiver of interest on tax bill. Mr. Carey, will you come back? Do we want to wait for him to be here to discuss this? Put this to the July meeting then? Can we notify him that we will do the July meeting? Thank you. Next item, discussion by council vote or other action on disagreement with notice of zoning ordinance violation for property located at 115 Mount Pleasant Road. Mr. Laramee. Mr. Laramee here?
Hi, this is Mr. Laramee. Just before we left, his hearing aids let go, so I'm his ears,
Okay.
unfortunately. There was my father received a certified letter saying that he was not in compliance with some zoning regulations, but after speaking to the zoning, the building inspector, I think this is supposed to go before the zoning board, right? Yes. So we actually have another letter that we have to write out. It had to do with a noise ordinance, but that'll probably come in another date. So I guess we're all set. Are we all set? Are you?
Do we want to get clarification from the building officials? Mr. Anderson here?
Yes.
I think there's been a slight communication problem between myself and Mr. Laramee. Excuse me. The condition of the law right now is one of quite a massive accumulation of inventory of logs. And the current leasee of the property and Mr. Laramee, I believe, agreed that they wanted to get rid of this inventory. So what they did was they brought in a huge industrial chipper, which seemed to be working pretty well for them to get this stuff out of there. But however, it created a noise disturbance over the neighborhoods behind Mr. Laramee's property. I took a sound meter over to Greenwood Lane. I got a reading of 75.9, which is quite a bit over the maximum. So in trying to mediate this with Mr. Laramee, I suggested to him that he write a letter to the council to ask for temporary relief from the noise ordinance. I don't know how long it'll take him to get rid of that stuff, but we did have several complaints regarding the chipper. So we did stop the operation, and that's why we're here.
Well, I don't know, I received the complaints as well, Karen.
And I did also.
Right. So the zoning violations are typically taken up by the zoning board. However, I don't know if this body will supersede the zoning board, and if you want to try and handle it or not. I don't think it's something you want to do.
But at the same time, if this is allowed until it's settled, the people that have to endure this higher than above range are going to be in the same place they were before. So
Yes.
where's the equity there for the property owners that surround us?
That's true, and unfortunately, we all have to endure the process. And if and when the council takes this matter up, obviously, the notices will go out, and those folks will be welcome to come and speak.
I have a question for the solicitor. Mr. Iglesias, if the zoning ordinance has changed, someone was grandfathered for previous existing, but now it's a non-conforming use, and the non-conforming use is laid fallow or has not been utilized or has not been used in how many years? Does that grandfather use go away because of a lack of using of that grandfather clause?
Your question is a little broad. I know a little bit about this particular matter. This particular matter actually has three issues. Right? There's a licensing requirement with the clerk's office, there's the zoning compliance and the zoning certificate with the building and zoning officer, and then there is the noise ordinance. And they each are independent tracks and analysis. The council determines when and if the noise ordinance will or will not be granted a temporary relief from, and I don't care what zone you're in, you can't violate the noise ordinance under any zone without your permission. So that's one issue. As far as Mr. Anderson's decision based upon the zoning certificate, an appeal of Mr. Anderson's decision is to the zoning board. Those grandfather rights you speak about will be sought out there. What Mr. Anderson has determined is the use on the property is not grandfathered in. It never has been an allowed non-conforming use. But Mr. Laramee wants to take that issue to the zoning board, and he has every right to do that. So the zoning board is the only authority for the zoning use, and from there to Superior Court. Council will be the noise ordinance, and the clerk's is the licensing requirement. And there was some confusion between these three categories and different bodies. And I think that is the way you've instructed him. There is nothing before the council tonight that could allow you to vote on the noise ordinance. They would need to file a request that's advertised for release so the public would know what that is.
Then I would definitely do that as soon as possible.
Well, that's up to Mr. Laramee. My understanding is a cease and desist order in place and being enforced.
It's not happening.
The equipment's been taken out
It's
of
been
the
taken out. So they understand the process. They just need to get to the right boards. I think Mr. Laramee's spokesperson indicated they understand where they're going to go with the two letters. That's my understanding in my discussion with Mr. Anderson, but I'll certainly defer to him if I misquoted him in any way. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
So there's nothing probably before this board?
Not for a vote. Not for a vote.
We don't recommend it's entirely up to Mr. Laramee to bring it to the building zoning, the zoning official.
I didn't want the council to get into this grandfather rights. You really have no jurisdiction there.
Zoning board is the zoning board.
Zoning board and
Right,
Superior Court.
Has nothing to do with us. We don't get involved in that.
But I do want an answer to that, though. Well, no rush, that's the way I understand it. Not for this particular case, established case.
So are you clear as what direction we need to go in from this point going forward? Okay.
I'll talk with him.
Okay.
I guess
My hearing aids let go.
I know.
You're here, that's the problem.
Thank you, Chair.
Next item, discussion by council vote or other action on exception to grant of easement and agreement on Parkview Drive, Mr. and Mrs. and Carterama. We do have some paperwork here. Exception to grant of easement and agreement. Is there a recommendation from the solicitor or the administrator?
From my office, please. All this is the original easement was issued with language that would preclude them from being able to install a fence. A fence has been installed under agreement with the sewer division that it has no impediment to the maintenance of the line or any activities that the sewer department will have going forward. There are no manholes across this easement. There's a manhole in Parkview Drive, and then there is a manhole on the Pacheco Park property. So the need to go into that easement for any purpose is highly unlikely, and impeding them from installing a fence is something that we didn't think was necessary. So the documentation, this is simply to clear that, so that the record is clear that they're allowed to have the fence with no objection from the town.
So is there a motion to grant the easement and authorize the administrator to sign it?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Zelinski, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. O'Hara. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Mrs. Bottomoli? Yes. Mrs. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Oshia?
Yes.
Mr. Swalenski?
Yes.
Mr. Vadeney?
Yes. Next item, discussion by council vote or other action on amendment to Code of Ordinances, Chapter 11, Article 14, Mobile Food Establishment, first reading. This is something new. Mr. Solicitor coming down from our friends in the state.
That's correct. Mr. President, members of the council, the state of Rhode Island passed a law that carved out and defined mobile food establishments to be regulated by the Department of Health and the Department of Business Regulation. And they've also given the cities and towns to July 1st to modify their processes. They didn't demand an ordinance, but their processes to comply with state law. And what I did was I looked at various ordinances throughout the state. Essentially, you still maintain control over the location, noise, hours of operation, and where they can operate. Just like you could when they were included in hawkers and peddlers. They used to be included in hawkers and peddlers. So here's the process now. If somebody were to apply for a mobile food establishment permit with the town, they have to show you first and foremost that they've got a permit from the state. If they don't have a permit from the state, application is incomplete. If they have a permit from the state, you cannot reject their application for all the health and safety reasons, only for hours of operation, noise, location, and number of units. So what I did was I drafted an ordinance that made that clear, carved it out of the hawkers and peddlers license, created a separate ordinance specifically for mobile food establishments, and basically said the town will continue to regulate hours of operation, location, noise, and number. I submitted that to the plan, I submitted to the zoning, I submitted to the police. The police still gave me a comment, and I made a change to this as a result of their comment. The plan indicated that he did not think, in his opinion, I'll let Tom speak, the zoning location should not be part of this. Basically, it should just be hours of operation in residential and business as determined by the town council. And Mr. Anderson did not really weigh in on behalf of the zoning board. My suggestion would be, this is only a first reading, but we need to get it done before July 1st. We enter it, ship it out to the boards. If they want to weigh in, they certainly can. And then the council at the second reading can make any modifications. Having said that, if you look at the version that's in front of you, there are two things that the council needs to address. One is on page 3, section 11-162, the number of permits granted. Either one, you put a number there, or two, you would direct me to strike that section and just say the number of permits to be granted by the council on a case-by-case basis, essential.
One of my questions.
So that's a decision. I wanted to give you that choice, much like you limit the number of liquor licenses. Do you want to limit the number of these? That's a real decision you can make. The hours of operation, the location, and the noise ordinance, all I did was copy your language from the hawkers and peddlers, so that the way you used to regulate these was under the hawkers and peddlers, and so I applied the same hours of operation, the same location, the same subject to noise, just like. In addition to that, I also included the provision in your ordinance that says the chief of police at any time can stop these mobile food establishments if they're in any way impeding traffic or causing any kind of disturbance in his opinion. So I did that, which was all good language from your hawkers and peddlers. And unless you want to regulate it differently than that, that would be essentially the same operation. One other thing. the police weighed in and wanted me to make sure that the penalty section was there, the jurisdiction was there, and you don't have that in yours, but I have it in another version. So my goal would be for the council at some point, either now or later, is to amend it to add the police comments and amend it to add either a number of permits under 11-162, or that there is no number. And then once that's amended, either now or at the next meeting, for final passage. It's succinct enough, but that's really it. We're mandated by state law to do this.
So with this, any food truck, any food vendor needs to come before this council to get a permit.
With
I understand,
first.
that's
Yeah.
separate, that's part of the requirement of us granting a permit, they've already got their department. So we just use what's coming up, just so everyone's aware. They have their North Smithfield Days coming up, and they want to have trucks here, they have the fireworks and stuff. Those folks need to come here and get a permit. Who notifies them of that, though? Just the state law, and
Well,
so,
the state is trying to provide notice. I prepared a draft notice for the clerk that we have a form that could be printed in the paper or circulated on somebody who's asking, what should I do to apply? I kind of laid out the process in a little open letter.
I know we don't have a say in it, but we need to be aware of what's coming down so we can handle it.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. President, so when we look at the mass application, 500 people, which Council President was alluding to, a 90-day period to apply, that's already come and gone for the 500 North Smithfield Heritage Day, so we have to take a look. I have a number of questions. Is it okay to pose them?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we make a motion in a second and then discussion again?
Sure.
So we can act on it.
Yes, that's the first reading.
Yep, is there a motion to accept the adoption of amendment to Code of Ordinances establishing Chapter 11, Article 14, mobile food establishments? Is there a motion for first reading?
For first reading, yes.
Motion by Mr. Bonioli, is there a second? Second by Mrs. Zelinski. Discussion, Mr. Zelinski.
So bear with me, a couple typos, I'll talk to you later.
I'm sure they are.
There's minor. So if you go to page 3, and it's under section 11-161, grounds for denial, suspension, revocation, has to do with noise.
I put that in.
Did good, I appreciate it, because if you go over to Park Square, there is a food vending truck over there in the parking lot where Ocean State Job Lot, and they have a generator, which is quite loud. It's too loud to the effect if someone was crossing the street or someone had to yell at somebody, hey, look out, they wouldn't hear it. So there are different generators with restriction on decibels, so that's something we really should look at. Number of permits, you alluded to that, solicitor. That's something we can discuss.
Yep, it's up to the council. I don't know if the council wants to, I don't know if North Smithfield has that kind of number of people applying that you really want to say, like Providence may say they only want 32 or 132, you may never have that.
I think this is a spotty thing where they come and go, and so.
Well, yeah, but the reason for that is if we have established businesses, I'm going to make this up, say we have an ice cream store, or we have a roast beef store. I certainly, I would not want to see a food vending truck come in to siphon off business from the ice cream store or the roast beef, so I'm making these up.
Yeah.
So that's my concern.
Well, we have control over that.
Yes, so that, and we also come back to how many can we have in town and what type. So
I think the same thing, though. We're not Providence where we have 50 food trucks driving around in the city. If it's anything, it's because we have an event going on and they're invited to it. And that's the issue that we face.
Yeah. The other thing, if I may, permits for events proposed to be located on public property, $300. And getting back to North Smithfield Heritage Day, fireworks. Geez, you know, they're working with such tight margins now. $300 seems to be a lot, but that's food for discussion. No pun intended. That's thought for discussion later on, $300. Because then when I look at the annual fee, $75, to me, I got to come back to, they're just siphoning business off our established businesses. So I'm a wee bit concerned to that at this point. I'm sure we can work our way through it. I also like on this next page, 11-167, excessive nuisance prohibited, loudspeaker noise, making devices intended. My first job out of high school was selling Dell's Lemonade. And y'all know that haunt, do you? Yeah, that can be an irritant. So that's something we're gonna have to look at. They also had ice cream, novelty vendors, ice cream truck coming through playing tunes, and, you know, much to the delight of the kids, but much to the disdain of moms and dads. So, you know, glad that was in there. We had to take a look at that. Electronic submission, I mentioned it earlier. Again, I'd right-hand myself. Again, watch the 90 days, especially for events that are coming up. And then the permitting fee. I think I've hit on pretty much, at this point, the thoughts that I had regarding this. There may be more the more I give it some thought, so.
Mr. President, I just want to make a comment about the fees. The fees are set by state law,
Are they?
not to exceed. So what I did was I just picked the minimum, maximum that the state would allow us to put it in. So it's a $75 fee and a $300 fee for multiple. They want to prevent you from charging $75 when somebody's doing one event. So they say $300 for as many trucks for that event, instead of $75 per truck, is what I'm gathering.
I didn't read it that way, but okay, I'll reread it.
I think that's what they're trying to, that's what they're trying to.
So we had a food truck event where we had 30 food trucks here, there's a competition.
No, it has to be on public, that's got to do with on public property, one event.
So it's one fee for all of them to come to that because someone's running the event.
For one event. So if somebody's running an event that they have 75 trucks, they wouldn't have to spend
What hours a truck?
$75. That, of course. So that's the only point about that. The only thing I would ask, as part of your first reading, I should indicate that the version the police have asked, they've asked me to add several provisions, making sure that the jurisdiction is the municipal court, that the